there's just not a lot of reasons to order trucks on the new side. Yet we still have freight, we still have construction, and so we've got really solid demand for the used truck side.
Hello and welcome to Market Pulse on fleetowner.com with Act Research. I'm Josh Fisher, an editor with fleetowner.com, and I'm joined by Steve Tam, Vice President with Act Research, to do a little mid-year catch-up on where we are and where we're going in the commercial vehicle world. Steve, it's great to see you today.
Josh, good to see you, and glad to be back around the industry. So yeah.
Me too. You're certainly a vital voice when we're in the industry, when we're hearing and talking about used trucks and new trucks and all sorts of orders in this interesting, complicated world of 2025. And speaking of new and used trucks, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit on how they play with each other. The preliminary new order data that your firm released from June shows a significant decline, while the May used truck report, which is the most recent I've seen from you folks, reported that prices fell because miles are up on that used equipment. How are these two very important parts of the industry playing with each other right now as July is upon us?
It's really quite fascinating to watch the interplay between the two markets. So on the news side, I think obviously given the uncertainty, truck buyers are pausing right now, right? They're not ordering trucks. Depending on where they play in the space, freight might be down or construction activity might be paused. And there's just not a lot of reasons to order trucks on the new side. Yet we still have freight, we still have construction, and so we've got really solid demand for the used truck side. You mentioned prices being down in the May data. We actually just released our preliminary data for June, and the retail market prices were up 10% month over month. So that's just phenomenal to me. And really, it's interesting because we've kind of seen this. I don't know, it's a segmentation of the used market where the late model, low mileage equipment has been in hot demand and it's bringing good prices. And our hypothesis there was, those buyers were maybe new truck buyers looking at the secondary market as a way to not have to make as significant a capital investment. In the June preliminary data, the younger stuff didn't do as well. It's the more experienced equipment, I guess, where we saw the bigger price increases. And to me, that just continues to beg of, folks looking at this market, seeing opportunity and trying to take advantage of it, trying to avoid tariffs, trying to avoid emissions, trying to avoid anything they don't know about. So,
It feels like that's been a lot of this year is this uncertainty. We've talked about it ad nauseum, and it feels almost like that uncertainty has become one of the most certain things that we have going on in 2025. You've talked earlier this or last month about the analysis paralysis that was driven by tariffs and the deregulation around emissions rules. Um, with those numbers you just mentioned too, are buyers adjusting to this new normal? What are your thoughts?
I think people are trying to, let's say, continue business as usual as much as they possibly can. But for sure, the degree of uncertainty or the lack of clarity, however you want to phrase it, is keeping people from making investments, keeping buyers in particular from making investments. Um, it's it's really frustrating, right? There are just so many potential outcomes, especially in the regulatory front, right? Think about the EPA emissions 2027. It's a law. It's on the books. The manufacturers are compelled to follow the law unless the law changes. Efforts are sort of underway to make that happen, but it's not a quick process, right? It's going to take time, and we don't really have, or we probably don't have enough runway for that to happen. Are there other avenues by which we could, undermine the 2027 mandate? Possibly. But we don't know, right? And once this thing gets into the hands of the courts, then you open up yet another whole set of possible outcomes. So it suffice it to say, Josh, that there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands that's still
Yeah.
going on. That's going to keep us from getting back to normal, whatever the heck that is, in the commercial vehicle market.
I wonder if you could just share with me your thoughts too, just a little overview on how these used truck prices typically, what sort of impact do they have on fleets? Are they holding on to their equipment longer through this uncertainty? And have you seen replacement cycles change as during these like unnormal times that have made up most of this decade?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. I don't know that the circumstances that we're dealing with right now, at least from a from an economic standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, are the specific drivers. And when I say that, I think about, the publicly traded carriers or the for hire carriers. Right now they're having a tough time. Freight growth is elusive, right? We've got a decent amount of freight, but we're just not increasing the amount of freight. And at the same time, we've seen a market share shift away from for hire carriers in favor of private fleets. And so the for hire carriers are suffering degraded financial performance, which is in fact affecting their capital investment, right? So we've heard publicly traded carriers say, hey, we're defleeting. We're actually getting rid of trucks. Now, that's one way to bring your average fleet age down, right? Get rid of your old stuff and just keep the good stuff. That brings it down. But your fleet also just got smaller. We've seen the flip side, right? We've seen folks deferring replacement. So they're, maybe they have 100 trucks that they need to refresh. They only trade in 80 of them, only buy 80 new ones. So they're slowing their replacement cycle down, which is having the net effect of, expanding the trade cycle, increasing the average fleet age. So you're getting a little bit of everything. I think one thing that folks in the industry don't often think about is that for that traditional used truck buyer, that same dynamic of fleet refreshment is also in play, right? If I'm a used truck buyer, maybe my sweet spot is looking, like you mentioned earlier, that off lease truck, maybe a 4-year-old truck, or let's say 4 to 5 year old truck. Well, when I've driven that truck for a couple of years, it's not 4 to 5 years old anymore. And so I'm in the market for another 4 to 5 year old truck, a 4 to 5 used truck. And so we see that same dynamic of replacing or refreshing the fleet there. I think that traditional used truck buyers have been a little bit more resilient in that regard, especially, as we were riding the price elevator down post COVID. They were getting those used truck buyers were getting some really quality equipment, lots to choose from at very attractive prices. That kind of has reversed course a little bit, or stabilized anyway, maybe is the better way to think about it. But it's still, in that regard, very much a buyer's market in the secondary space. So.
Well, that leads me to, I was going to ask you to pull out your patented ACT research crystal ball and tell me what you see in the future as we head towards the rest of this year. Is it better to be a buyer or a seller of used equipment right now?
Yeah, on the used truck side, I think it's probably better to be a seller. I think, of course, that's going to depend, right? I've got to maintain my fleet. I can't undercut my service to my customers, but prices, we believe, are going to edge up. Used truck prices are as the year progresses. Not significantly. You're looking at maybe a 5% increase as the year closes out. Nonetheless, going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. At least that's the direction that we see it heading at this point. So I think there will be some fleets that might make the decision to defer selling or replacing or trading, or however you want to think about it. And that also gives them time to kind of let some of this uncertainty hopefully uh, find some definition, right? Maybe we can see a little bit of economic improvement or some increase in freight. or some definitive answers on where tariffs are really going.
Sounds like you're asking a lot, Steve.
I know.
So how do and then before I let you go, I'm wondering how do you see this impacting capacity in North America for the rest of this year? We've certainly seen capacity a lot of changes this year. Is this what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's been the real conundrum in this cycle, Josh. This cycle has been, longer than any that we've had, certainly in recent memory, probably in this century, if I can say that. Kind of crazy, right? But and it kind of goes back to one of the comments that I made earlier about private fleets, right? They are, well, first of all, they have longer trade cycles. So they actually started pre-buying back in 2023. Our data shows that. We've had conversations with the private fleets. They confirm that. So there's one piece of it, right? They're bringing their fleet age down ahead of 2027, whether it happens or not. They started 4 years ago, so it's sort of irrelevant. But the other key piece is they've added capacity, right? They're increasing their fleet size. And as they've taken share away from the for-hire carriers, the whole pie got bigger. It's not just that the slice got transferred, right? And then at the same time, they're hauling a higher percentage of their in and outbound freight. And we were just down at a conference, the National Private Truck Council conference in Florida back in April, and that appetite has not been sated. They still have every intention of continuing that type of activity. And so in a period where demand would suggest that we should be shrinking the fleet, and that's what we need to get spot rates up, get contract rates up, improve for hire profitability. We're going the other direction. We're increasing the fleet. So we don't think that plays for much longer. And really, the solution is twofold, right? The industry can only control one piece. We can only control the number of trucks that we put into the fleet. We can't do anything about freight. It looks like, knock on wood, we're going to see that slowing of new trucks entering the fleet in the second half of 2025. And then 2026 is probably going to be flat from our perspective. But at the same time, we're going to see, hopefully, a moderate uptick in economic activity and in freight. So we'll consume some of that excess capacity and kind of hopefully get this silly ship righted.
I guess we're gonna have to just continue to check in month by month to see how things are going. That seems to be the only way to really know these days, right?
Yeah, month to month is probably not frequent enough the way things change.
Well, I'm going to be trying to get myself on your calendar as much as possible then, as the year rolls on. Steve, I really appreciate you take a little time to fill us in on how the market looks in these choppy days that we live in, and let's hope we can find some certainty at least by Christmas time.
I amen to that, brother.